This video demonstrates how to set up and use Desktop License Server to activate desktop applications running on Mac, Windows, or Linux computers. If you've ever launched a commercial application, the first screen you'll likely see is some type of an activation screen where the user enters a serial number to activate the application to their specific computer. Here we see some different applications that can be used to protect and license software that's developed in a variety of different development environments, including Mac's music applications, Unity 3D, Adobe Air applications, Photoshop plugins, or basically any type of development environment where you can create software or even different document types. Typically, those tools are used together with an account on the Safe Activation server, where you can just log into through a browser to your account and set up a few screens of information to enable the online serial number activation process. But in this video, we're going to actually be looking at how you can set up your own licensing server on a Windows or Linux website using Desktop License Server. You'll start the setup process by installing Desktop License Server on a Mac or Windows development computer. It will install an admin application that can be used to define licenses, generate serial numbers, and communicate back and forth with your actual server executable that's running out on a Windows or Linux website. There's also a user guide that's installed that kind of describes how to go through the whole setup process. For the purpose of this demonstration video, we're actually going to run the website part of this system on the same local Windows computer. And the way we do that is we've installed XAMPP, which installs an Apache server, PHP, and everything all on this local Windows computer. Then we can simply copy files into a folder, and we have a folder called DLS, and this shows all the files and folders already set up for a working server. So between the admin application running on your development machine, again, either a Mac computer or a Windows computer, and the server side of things typically running out on the internet on either a Linux or Windows website, those two parts together create your desktop license server. To demonstrate how you set up the files on the server end of things, we've cleared all the files. The only thing we left is the main DLS folder. And inside that folder we have two empty folders, one named Desktop License Data and the other one Email Queue. The name and case sensitivity of the name is critical, especially for Linux servers. Now, the first step is we're just going to copy up some files for the executables to the server. And we can get those files from the installed Desktop License Server folder here. So we have, I'm going to go to the Open File location, and these are this is the whole folder of files that was installed on our Windows machine here. We see the user guide itself. There was a link to open it. The admin application itself, and there's a shortcut to launch that. But we see we have a folder of Linux 32-bit files or Linux 64-bit files or a Windows server files for that. The Linux options are going to be the most popular options for setting up a server for most developers. But in order to run everything on this same Windows computer, we're actually going to use the Windows server files. So if we open up that, we just see that we have an executable and a folder containing several supporting libraries. And we just simply want to copy those files and put them on our server. With a real system where the server is out on the internet, you would have to use an FTP program or something to upload those files. We need a couple other files up on our server. We need this PHP file. Let's just select all the files we need. We need this PHP file, this one, and this one. And we're simply going to, again, copy and paste. So we have most of the files needed for our server to execute. We just need some data files that we're now going to construct with desktop license admin application, and that will allow us to define a license and a batch of serial numbers, and we'll upload those to our server as well to complete the process. Now let's set up a couple files to define our license and our list of serial numbers. To do that, we're going to have to launch the desktop license admin application. On the online panel, we need to set up the URL to our server. That's to the dls.php file, which we see right here. Since we're running this in localhost, our domain name is localhost. For a real situation where the server's running out on the internet, this is going to be an IP address or a domain name right here. On the license setup panel, we're going to define a license. You can define multiple different licenses, but we're just going to define one license. We've already got it set up. If we click in the first column of that row, it pops up the license dialog that we've already filled in. The user guide will go through each of these parameters and tell you specifically how you want to set it up for a specific type of license. The main things is the calculation field comes from the activation calculation that you define within Quick License when you've configured a license type there. And that's also where you get the ticket code. And then you'll have some checkboxes which will determine the fields of information that are collected in the activation dialog on first launch. Again, the details of this setup you'll get from the user guide. Once you've set that up, the information about the license, you'll click Save Licenses, and then you'll go to the serial number setup panel, select that named license, and generate a batch of serial numbers. It comes with one default serial number, and we've already generated a batch of additional 10. Let's generate a few more serial numbers just so you see the process. You'll simply click the Generate button, indicate how many serial numbers you want to generate, how many activations you want to allow for each serial number. That determines how many different computers can be activated with that serial number. And then just click OK, and then you can see the additional serial numbers are generated. So we also want to click Save here. And now we want to upload those two different files that we've just created. The serial number file, we just click Export, and if our server was out on the internet, we would export it to disk and then upload it with an FTP program. But since our server is right here on the same local computer, we just go to the desktop license data folder and save it right there. And likewise, we go to the license setup and click Export Licenses, and again export our license.data file to the desktop license data folder. And if we've set up everything correctly, we should be able to go to Online and click Status, and we should see now our server is online synchronized. It's ready to go and serve licenses. While other videos cover the details of defining a license and applying it to your application, we're just going to cover an outline of the process here. We start with Quick License, where we define the license. And this will be a simple product license that never times out, allows reactivation on the same computer. You'll see the URL in the activation URL, and this is referring to the dls.php file on our local host. And we also have set this so our server is localhost DLS, and we've defined a couple of parameters here in our that are going to be used to construct our custom activation dialog. In addition to collecting the serial number, we're going to be collecting the company name and email address. So that's basically all the information that's needed to then go and click the modify ticket button, generate the ticket file that defines all the information about our license. You'll also notice the ticket code shown here and the activation calculation shown here were needed when we set up this license in Desktop License Server. So if we look at the ticket file that we've generated in our source folder here, and the application that we want to protect, and also we have an icon file that we want to apply, that those files are used to construct the protected application with the add license wrapping tool. So essentially what add license does is you select the application, the ticket file that defines the license, the icon file you want to apply, the output folder, and then we'll set the retain activation. So once activated, if you ever provide an update, the user doesn't have to activate it again to their computer. And then we can generate a 64-bit protected exe or a 32-bit protected exe. And that's by just clicking the build button. And that's essentially what we've done when we generated the two exes shown here in our output folder. When a customer buys your product, they'll receive a serial number that was previously set up in the Desktop License Server. That serial number could be delivered through an automated process from your shopping cart or through an email when you receive the order information. When the user launches your application, they're going to then enter that serial number into the activation screen. And they'll also enter the other information that you might want to collect. In this case, we're just collecting the company name and an email address. We've now activated the application, and on each launch thereafter, the application just continues to run. The online panel of the admin application can be used to query customer licensing information. If we select the license, select a search field, and we can look up the customer licensing information for a particular company, for example. Here we see the serial number, the company name, the email address, the activation date, and the status of the license. So whatever information that we decided to collect during the customer activation process can be stored in the record. Let's do another example where we're going to query based on a serial number that was used during the activation process. And again, we see the record of information. Let's look at another example of what you can do with Desktop License Server. Let's say the customer has activated, they're running for about 6 months now, they want to buy a new computer. Well, if they hold down the Shift Command keys while launching the application, a license options dialog is presented. These features are enabled when you set up the license and within Desktop License Server. And what it allows the user to do is they can present information that was entered during the activation process, but they can also release the license from that computer. And when they do that, it's now blocked on that computer, and they can go to a new computer and activate the license there using that same serial number. If we go back to our admin screen, and let's go ahead and query the license now, we can see that that license is currently blocked. So now the user would be able to go to a new computer and activate with that same serial number. But while on the same computer, we can go back and restore the license if it hasn't been used on another computer. And we'll demonstrate that now by, again, holding down the Shift Command keys while launching the protected application. And we can go to the Restore License, click OK. And when we do this, the license has now been restored, meaning that if the user launches, they can run the application again. If we go back to our desktop license admin screen and refresh our information, we see the license is now active again. To summarize this video, we started by installing Desktop License Server on either a Mac or Windows development machine. That's where we run the admin application. For the server side, we can either use a Linux or Windows website, and we set up the server by creating a couple of folders, uploading the executables and PHP scripts. We then launch the admin screen where we can define the type of license we want, a batch of serial numbers, and upload those files into the server. So once we have the server set up, we can use various applications to define different types of licenses, like time-limited trial licenses, product licenses, subscription licenses, and then apply it to some type of an application or document that we want to protect. We can then sell a serial number with our product so that on first launch, the customer will enter that serial number and some other information into an activation screen to activate that protected application or document to their specific computer. And then later we can also use the admin license server admin application to actually query the activation data entered by a customer.